Imagine a line drawn not by a stick, but by a beam of light. A line that stretches for 170 kilometers, containing a city 9 million strong, encased in mirrored walls that reflect a desert unchanged for millennia. A city with no cars, no roads, and no carbon emissions, powered entirely by renewable energy and governed by artificial intelligence. Sounds like science fiction, a fantasy plucked from the silver screen. Yet this is not a movie set. This is the line, the central nervous system of a project named NEOM, a $500 billion bet being built today in the northwestern corner of Saudi Arabia. This singular vision, audacious to the point of seeming absurd, is the perfect symbol for the kingdom in the 21st century. A nation forged in the heat of the desert, built on a sea of black oil, now desperately and lavishly trying to architect a future where that very oil is irrelevant. This is the story of how a kingdom of sand became a global financial empire, and the even more remarkable story of its monumental gamble to become something else entirely. To understand the sheer scale of this transformation, you must first understand the force behind it. The architect of this new Arabia is Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, a man whose ambition is matched only by the treasury at his disposal. When he unveiled in 2016, many observers dismissed it as a glossy brochure, a public relations exercise filled with buzzwords like diversification and sustainability. They were wrong. It was not a brochure. It was a declaration that the kingdom's addiction to oil revenue was a strategic vulnerability in a world rapidly turning green. The plan was and is breathtakingly simple in its goal, yet infinitely complex in its execution. Use the colossal wealth generated by the final decades of the oil era to build a new economy from scratch. An economy based on technology, logistics, tourism, entertainment, and finance. To do this, Saudi Arabia is not just opening up. It is attempting to reinvent its very identity, both to the world and to its own young population, 70% of whom are under the age of 35. This reinvention is happening at a dizzying pace. Where religious police once patrolled the streets, enforcing strict social codes, today you find music festivals, international film screenings, and women driving freely. The kingdom that was once one of the most closed-off nations on Earth is now actively courting international tourists with simplified visa processes and developing luxury resorts on untouched Red Sea islands. But these social reforms, as profound as they are merely the lubricant for the real engine of change, the economic restructuring. At the heart of this is the Public Investment Fund, or PIF. For decades, the PIF was a sleepy, domestic-focused holding company, barely a footnote in the world of global finance. Under Mohammed bin Salman, it has been transformed. It has become a leviathan. With assets projected to soar past $2 trillion, the PIF has morphed into the primary vehicle for the kingdom's ambitions. A sovereign wealth fund armed with an unprecedented war chest and an aggressive, global mandate. The strategy is twofold. At home, it is the primary funder of the gigaprojects, NEOM, the Red Sea Project, the entertainment city of Qiddiya. These are not just construction projects. They are attempts to create entire new economic ecosystems. Abroad, the PIF has become one of the most aggressive and talked about investors on the planet. It's in your Uber ride, your video games through stakes in Nintendo and Activision Blizzard, and in the very fabric of the global electric vehicle race with its early and hugely profitable investment in Lucid Motors. It bought Newcastle United, a legacy English football club, signaling its intent to become a major player in the multi-billion-dollar world of global sports. It has poured billions into Blackstone's infrastructure funds, SoftBank's Vision Fund, and a myriad of tech startups and blue-chip companies. Every investment is a chess move designed to do three things: generate massive returns to fuel Vision 2030, acquire the technology and expertise the kingdom needs to build its new industries, and project Saudi Arabia's influence far beyond the geopolitics of oil. This aggressive push on a direct consequence of the kingdom's core paradox. The very source of its immense power, the seemingly endless reserves of crude oil, is also its Achilles heel. For 80 years, the world came to Saudi Arabia, seeking its energy. Now, Saudi Arabia must go to the world, seeking its ideas, its technology, and its talent. The futuristic gloss of Riyadh's King Abdullah Financial District, with its sharp, crystalline towers, stands in stark contrast to the vast, empty desert that surrounds it. That contrast is everything. It is the physical manifestation of the kingdom's journey from a nomadic past to a hypermodern future. But how did this happen? How did a fragmented, impoverished territory, largely bypassed by history, suddenly find itself at the very center of the global economy, with the power to build cities in the sky? The answer doesn't lie in a boardroom or a bank. It lies buried deep beneath the sand, in a story of risk, religion, and a stroke of geological luck that would change the world forever. Before the discovery, the land was a patchwork of warring tribes, a harsh and unforgiving expanse of desert, largely untouched by the industrial revolutions that had reshaped Europe and America. Its unification into the Third Saudi state in 1932 by a warrior king, Abdulaziz ibn Saud, was a feat of political and military will. He forged a nation-strategic alliances, most notably a pact with the conservative Wahhabi religious movement that gave his rule legitimacy and a powerful ideological core. But legitimacy doesn't fill a treasury. The new kingdom was desperately poor, surviving on pilgrimage revenues and modest taxes. Ibn Saud knew he was sitting on a fragile entity, a kingdom united by his hand but lacking the economic foundations to endure. He needed a miracle, and he was willing to look for it in the most unlikely of places, beneath the very sands that defined his people's hardship. While British influence was dominant in the region, the British geologists had already surveyed the area and declared it barren of oil. So, in a move of shrewd contrarianism, Ibn Saud turned to the Americans, granting a concession in 1933 to Standard Oil of California, or SoCal, the precursor to Chevron. It was a culture clash. American geologists, with their scientific equipment and rugged optimism, descended upon a medieval kingdom of strict social mores and deep-seated traditions. For 5 grueling years, they drilled. They drilled through sand, limestone, and constant disappointment. Dry hole after dry hole tested the patience of SoCal's executives back in San Francisco and the faith of the Saudi king. The company spent millions with nothing to show for it, and by 1938, they were ready to give up. The entire venture hinged on one final, deep drilling effort at a site named Dammam No. 7. For weeks, it yielded nothing but gas and trouble. Then, on March 4, 1938, it happened. The drill bit hit a different kind of pressure, and crude oil, light, sweet, and abundant, gushed to the surface. It wasn't a trickle, it was a torrent. They hadn't just found oil. They had tapped into the single largest source of crude oil the world has ever known. Dammam No. 7 was later renamed the Prosperity Well, a name that proved to be a staggering understatement. The kingdom wasn't just sitting on an oil field. It was a continuous sea of petroleum. This discovery gave birth to the oil company, or Aramco, a consortium of American oil giants that would operate the concession. The deal was simple. The Americans provided the capital, the technology, and the global distribution network to extract and sell the oil. The Saudi kingdom provided the oil itself and received royalties in return. In the beginning, it was a lopsided partnership. The kingdom was the junior partner, a landlord receiving rent for its property. But that rent was transformative. It funded the creation of a modern state, building roads, ports, schools, and hospitals where there had been nothing. It laid the foundations for a welfare state that provided free education, healthcare, and subsidized utilities for its citizens. A new city, Dhahran, rose from the desert as Aramco's headquarters, a slice of American suburbia complete with baseball fields and air-conditioned homes, existing as a separate world from the traditional life outside its gates. But as Saudi oil began to fuel the post-World War II economic boom in America, Europe, and Japan, a quiet shift was happening. The landlord was beginning to understand the true value of his property. The tipping point came in 1973. In response to American support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War, the Arab oil-producing nations, led by Saudi Arabia, did the unthinkable. They declared an oil embargo against the United States and its allies. For the first time, the kingdom used oil not just as a commodity, but as a political weapon. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the West. Gas prices quadrupled. Economies stalled. Long lines formed at gas stations, a visceral symbol of a superpower's sudden vulnerability. The 1973 oil shock was a global economic earthquake, and its epicenter was Riyadh. It was the moment Saudi Arabia graduated from a mere producer to the world's central banker of energy. It could, with the turn of a valve, plunge the industrial world into recession or lift it towards prosperity. The transfer of wealth was biblical. Hundreds of billions of dollars, soon to be trillions, flowed from the consuming nations to the producers. These were the petrodollars, and Saudi Arabia was now swimming in them. This newfound power, the relationship with Aramco. The kingdom was no longer content to be a passive recipient of royalties. It wanted control. Throughout the 1970s, the Saudi government began a process of Saudization, methodically buying out its American partners. It started with a 25% stake in 1973, increased it to 60% in 1974, and by 1980, the kingdom had assumed 100% control. Aramco, the company that had built modern Saudi Arabia, now belonged to it. This was the final step in the creation of the financial empire. The kingdom now controlled every aspect of its oil, from production to pricing. The vast revenues, too large to be absorbed by the domestic economy alone, were recycled into the global financial system. The Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority, the kingdom's central bank, became a colossal buyer of U.S. Treasury bonds, effectively helping to finance American government debt. The financial fortunes of the Desert Kingdom and the world's leading superpower were now inextricably linked. This symbiotic, often fraught relationship, security for oil, petrodollar recycling for financial stability, defined the world order for the next 40 years. It was this system that built the immense treasure chest that the Public Investment Fund is now deploying to build a world beyond oil. The empire of sand had become an empire of finance, built on a foundation of black gold. And so we return to the present, to the mirrored walls of the line reflecting the very desert that birthed this journey. The story of Saudi Arabia's financial empire is a triptych. The first panel is the past, a harsh, nomadic existence transformed by a pact between a warrior king and American oilmen. The second is the present, an oil-fueled dominion, a kingdom wielding immense financial power through its control over the world's energy lifeline, now using that power to fund a national metamorphosis. The final panel is the being furiously sketched out by Vision 2030. It is a panel filled with contradictions, a push for sustainability powered by the world's largest oil producer, a leap into artificial intelligence and tourism from one of the most socially conservative societies on Earth, a $500 billion city rising from the sands. The transition from an empire of oil to an empire of innovation and investment is the kingdom's greatest gamble. Whether this audacious line in the sand leads to a sustainable new future or becomes a monument to unfulfilled ambition will not just define Saudi Arabia. It will shape the world that comes after oil.